Hi, I'm Mikey O'Connell with The Hollywood Reporter, and welcome to A Closer Look with the Apple TV Plus comedy Palm Royale. We have all the creatives, not all of them, there are quite a few, but we have 6 great ones with us today. Abe Sylvia, the showrunner, executive producer, and director, and writer. Kristen Wiig, actor and executive producer. Tate Taylor, director and executive producer. Josh Lucas, an actor. Ellen Reed, set decorator, and Jeff Toyne, composer. I'm gonna start one for all of you. Casting obviously impacts a project so much. It changes the character, and the cast that you assembled on this show is crazy and insane. Like, how much did the ensemble that you landed inform the arc of the show and the different characters and where they went?
It impacted it tremendously. Yeah.
On a daily basis.
Yeah. When Carol Burnett agreed to do it, I had to go back to the writer's room and say,
Norma
has to wake up now, guys.
Was there a version of this show where that character is not awake at all?
Correct.
And you got Carol Burnett to sign up for that?
Yeah, well, we had already massaged it into that slowly but surely Norma would wake up and be aware of what was going on around her. And then when we got Carol, we said we had to turn that up.
Yeah, it has to be a little bit earlier in the season.
Yeah. We just moved it up.
And what about you? Obviously, when you have Kristen Wiig, you want to lean into some of her talents. And I mean, watching the show, it doesn't seem like anyone else could have played this character. So how did it change when you came on board?
I don't know how it changed, but I mean, as far as Maxine, I mean, I read the book and obviously the pilot and started to see Maxine a little bit, but it was really through everybody here kind of influenced Maxine, what she looked like, how she is with other people. It was very collaborative, I think, finding her, because there's so many different aspects. Yeah.
And we had such an embarrassment of riches from our costumes and set design and set decorating that it really, even on set, I would look over and there would be this amazing bowl that would just be there, and it would affect how we would shoot stuff just because it was such a character in our show. And then back to the acting thing, a testament to these ladies, Carol Burnett said that when I heard who was in this, it was automatic yes, because these are my heroes, and to have a 90+ legend speak of these women as their heroes too, it was pretty cool.
She's amazing.
While we're on the subject of Carol Burnett, Kristen, Josh, there is a moment in this show where, for lack of a better description, you're kind of like Weekend at Bernie's-ing a 90-year-old international
We pretty much
icon.
are Weekend at Bernie's.
Fully.
What is going through one's mind when you have Carol Burnett in your hands and you're like flipping her on a hospital bed?
Not only is
She
she
was
game
game,
for it, but
yeah.
part of it was like, she's not Carol Burnett to us.
Ellen, Tate, can you talk to me about sort of like establishing the visuals here? There's so many different directions you can go in with the 60s, and obviously Palm Beach is its own specifics. What did you want to capture visually with this era and this location, which was not a time or place you actually could go to?
Well, as it's been said, it began with Slim Aarons.
Yep.
And the way we wanted to shoot this, where their beautiful work and our costume designers' work, you wanted to see everything going, especially in Grayman's. I mean, there's a lot of wide shots because you guys are such a huge part of this show. That's what people say. They go, it's total escapism, and I feel like I'm there. You could speak more about. We just basically also said, go nuts. There'll probably not be a no in
That's
your
for
request.
Sure. Yes, and you all were very generous with us and allowed us to really create that character of the environment and to support that. And I think it started with a trip with you and John Carlos, our production designer, down to Palm Beach. And seeing the history that was there. A lot of it's changed, so it wasn't shot there, but seeing the history that was there, trying to break into the breakers. No, was it the break?
I said, we can't shoot there. You can't shoot in Palm Beach unless you're CNN in front of Mar-a-Lago. That's it.
And sometimes not even then.
Not even then. And so I said, we got to go down there. So we flew down there, and just to walk the streets and just to feel the energy of the women, and it has not changed. It's very much the same. And so there was a club there that we modeled Palm Royale after. And I said, we gotta go look in there. And you cannot. It's like our show, our Palm Royale. You can't go in. And I said, well, I'm going in. And John Carlos was scared. I was in board shorts and flip-flops, and I broke into the club through a back door and was caught and kind of roughly escorted out of the club. But I did it for the art.
You did.
I did it for Kristen.
Thank you.
You
You did it.
But I did peek in there, and it was as stiff and rigid and beautiful as you would think.
And your photo is now on a wall there as well.
I hope so. They didn't take a photo.
Ellen, can you talk to me about Los Angeles, a place that at this point neither looks like the 1960s or Florida at all? It never really did. How do you work around those sort of like outside environments and decorating a set when you're not just on a set?
Well, so some of LA was established at the same time as Palm Beach. So you had architecture that was happening here at the same time it was happening down there in the 20s and 30s. And so John Carlos was able to find locations where they really mimicked some of the buildings that were down there. And so the interiors may have changed, but the exteriors were very much similar. And so that really helped us. And we had to go to West Palm Beach. We went into San Fernando. And San Fernando, some of the streets haven't really changed from the 50s and 60s. The signage has, but the structure of the buildings hasn't changed. So when we went and did that entire street scene in which you famously crashed your car, we went in and just changed the facades of the buildings and changed the signage, and then went into the buildings and changed the interiors to meet our show. But some of that was here, so it made it a nice transition.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it too is when you walked onto the sets that were built at Paramount, you'd bring people who had been on movies that cost $300 million who are walking through being like, I've never seen anything like this. The rooms themselves, they didn't have a fourth wall conceit, right? They were whole. And you'd look around and the design elements were so deep, and the coloring and the schematics and different things that they were doing. And then oddly enough, my sister-in-law is the costume designer of the show, purely coincidentally, and she and John Carlos and you guys would get together and they'd be matching fabrics with the wallpaper, and it was like this really deep layer of attempting to make something that was visually just spectacular, to say the least, which almost becomes weirdly like a problem for us because you're walking into it. I mean, first of all, in the costumes, everything. So everything is so heightened and so deeply colorful, even as the show does as well, begins to have a kind of LSD hallucination to it. It was really amazing to walk through and see it.
At one point, literally.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Can the producers and Ellen also talk about sort of tailoring these environments to tell more about the characters? Because that's something that we just spoke about before this.
Yes. That was really important to us, was to talk about how we could further develop the characters that you've created. And so we, and the environments were to be these lush, incredible environments that would support the characters. And the one thing was that the ladies always shined. So the ladies always had to shine within the environment. But that environment had to support that, and also to be a little bit of a tell of who their character was. And then, as their characters develop throughout the season, if you start to look at their environments, you start to realize there's tells there. For Evelyn Rollins, when you go in her office, there are birds, there's plumage everywhere, and you find out later in the season that there's a reason for that. There's a reason for.
Well, the fact is that all of us have authorship of all of these characters. And to Ellen's point about the birds, so Ellen and John Carlos and Alex Friedberg, their image for Evelyn Rollins' character, played by Allison Janney, was that she's a peacock. So her colors and her patterns is all peacock. And so they created this bird room. That, we think of birds when we think of Evelyn. So they were just flamingos and stuffed birds and peacocks, and this was not something that was not a direction we gave them. But then it became part of the script. And so that's really exciting when everybody's adding layers to the characters, to the point where there's one moment in episode 8, I believe, and Kristen's in, Evelyn's having to pack up her bird room. And Kristen says to Janny, gosh, you have so many birds. And Janny, off the cuff, says, you should see my bird room. We didn't write that. So it's just funny when everybody's sort of on the same page and everybody's writing it together.
Yeah.
And I remember actually going into your office before we started shooting and seeing all the drawings of like Dinah, played by Leslie Bibb, her house. And it was like, oh, I kind of got who she was a little more.
The whites and the
The
blues.
whites and the blues, and I knew it through wardrobe, but having teams be so collaborative and lift each other up and be like, oh, I love that, let's do this. It creates better art. I mean, it really does.
And it's rare.
Yeah,
And
it
you
was
see what
really
happens
like a
when it
beautiful
happens.
thing.
Jeff, what was your mission statement here? Because obviously there are so many different directions one could go in with the 60s, because America was very fractured at the time, culturally, politically, in every way possible.
I just had to live up to what I was trying to support on the screen.
Yeah.
There was so much, layers and details and vibrant color. It was my mission to try and bring that to support the show with music that had layers and color and a really expansive sound. I mean, and that allowed us to dig into some of our favorite music from the 60s, because the stuff that we loved also did that, had terrific color and big scope. So
We
that's
wanted it to feel like a movie that was made in 1969 that broke the studio. Like at the end of the 60s, before we're transitioning sort of to the Easy Rider mindset, they were spending more and more and more on these movies, and it's like big orchestras, big
Yeah.
production, CinemaScope was like, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we're shooting in 235, and we have a full orchestra. And Jeff was able to record so many of the songs like in the studios were Henry Mancini. It's a pretty remarkable gift that Apple gave us, that they supported us in this mission of maximalism.
How does that impact the process, being in a space like that, a storied studio for someone who is so synonymous with the time?
It's terrific. It's inspiring, to say the least. And having live musicians, in some ways, there's more work to get the music onto the stands in front of them, but there's less work because the music gets mixed in the room. The musicians can all hear themselves, and they can balance to each other, and they can respond to direction immediately. We want this to be a little more furtive. We want this to be bigger. We can. It's really exciting to be in the studio with musicians.
The show is handmade in that way. This is not an AI-generated show. There's very little visual effects. This is about great craftspeople, working at their craft by hand every day.
Well, you just said it, I've never heard the mission of maximalism, which is so true. The embarrassment of riches that we had from every aspect of it, the cast. And so part of it is everyone is bringing not just such an A game, there became, I say a heavyweight boxing match at every level where people are coming in. You go see what these guys are doing before you'd arrive, and the amount of work that was going into it. And the same thing I think was happening with the cast as well, particularly when you're led by Kristen and Carol and Allison, and nobody's showing up not knowing what they're doing. If anything, is the exact opposite. People were really dedicated to bringing a maximalism to it, at performance, at visual, at design, so it had that just challenge in a weird way.
Before we move on from the people who are not here, I do want to talk about Ricky Martin for a moment, because in the pilot episode, he's not heavily featured. And by the end of the show, he's almost like the heart of it. How much of that was impacted by casting him in finding that character?
Tremendously.
Yeah.
Our initial conception of Robert was sort of another bitchy gay friend. It's like, oh, we've seen that so many times. And then we have this wonderful feeling, empathetic, sensitive guy who rivals Cary Grant when you put a camera on him. And it's like, okay, this is going in a completely opposite direction that we need to follow. For a showrunner, it's always like, what is happening now? What is your show today? What is your show showing you that it wants to be? And don't be afraid to embrace it when those moments come. So for Ricky, it was like, oh, we already have enough cattiness in the ladies. And so, interestingly enough, the straight man on the show comically is the gay character. And I haven't seen that before. But that was impacted by the essential qualities of who Ricky is as an actor and who Ricky is as a person, guiding our choices along the way. And it's how you get the best out of everybody.
There are a lot of fantastical elements to this show, especially in the last third of the season. There's a whale, there's an astronaut, there's a lot of wild coincidences. Did you set up guardrails in the writer's room about how much fun you could have with stuff like that, but also remain grounded, which I really feel you did, because there are such stakes in this show, knowing that it starts with this sort of gunshot and you spend the entire season wondering who's on either end of that.
Yeah. Well, I think the guiding principle for everybody's like, make the choice that delights yourself. And if it delights you, then it will come through, on screen. And, I think when we were developing the arc of season 1, the idea was, you're on the journey with Maxine. So she's trying to get into this world that, she knows all about it, but the audience doesn't. So you're learning about these people in real time. So she's just meeting Ricky. We know something's going to happen there, but we're not quite sure, And as she gets into the world and the things that she has to do to keep up appearances become more and more absurd as she gets to know the world, the situations become more absurd. And we just thought it was a very human thing. It's like, once people attain wealth, what are the absurdities that come along with that kind of wealth? And what are the absurdities in terms of what they have to do to hang on to it? What do those things become? And Maxine's just, she's on this sinking ship and she's just plugging the holes as fast as she can, and the things that she has to go through to keep her head above water, that's where the absurdity comes from, and it's a human absurdity. Yeah.
And also it is sort of reflective of movies from that time.
Totally.
And sitcoms. We've sort of talked about, you would just go to the movies and this thing that would never really happen, you just kind of accept it because it's in the movie. And I think we love that sort of escape and that sort of like the coincidences, like you said. So I think we kind of wanted to embrace that and sort of pay homage a little to that kind of storytelling.
Yeah.
Josh, I feel like actors have two different approaches sometimes with serialized characters. They want to know where it's going and the sort of journey they're on, or they want to read it script by script and just let it unfold for them. What was your approach?
Was the learn as you go as well. Because, and I also would say it was developing and changing and growing. And Abe talks about the moment where he sees Ricky and I together for the first time, and that becomes something that they want to heavily accentuate that relationship. And I think that was consistently where I felt that too. It was like, oh wow, this is, I did have a sense the character was going to grow and not just be a fantasy, but that I think that was part of the whole thing about this show. I also think that from a tonal aspect too, it's so tremendously fun to play because everyone was there, like the same way you have the embarrassment of riches, the mission of maximalism is that the joy of the experience of making it was so deep for all of us that I hope and think that comes through the life, even when they're all, you watch Maxine, she's wildly stressed out for most of it, but it's terrifically fun. And so for Douglas, it was a particularly interesting challenge because I don't think he's very bright, but he's from the world, he exists within it, he's totally comfortable within it. And the thing for me that I take away from the show as well is that so much of what we're seeing in entertainment these days has a message, a tone to it that you're being taught something or whatever. And I think this was clearly from all of us to say, no, this is Pillow Talk, the movie you gave me. This is those movies that you're talking about from the late 60s before that change happened, where it was purely just a work of joyful entertainment. And I do think there's terrific subtext and layers to it, about this world of people who are living inside of a cataclysmic time in America and totally don't care. Like completely don't, and don't even want to care.
Kristen, is that how you work? Do you want to know where things are going? And when you're an executive producer, does it force you to just have to know where things are going?
Well, kind of like what Josh was saying. I mean, there was an element of things changing as we went, but I think for me, I did need to know sort of where she ended up in order to know how to get there. But yeah, things were sort of like, even with our relationship, I think doing scenes with Josh and seeing how we reacted to each other. I don't know, something about your relationship becomes born there when you're doing it.
Tate, this was such a clearly expensive production and a lot of recreation, so many things going on. Like, what was the most challenging scene or episode to direct of the ones that you directed?
The finale.
Yeah.
Well, the pilot, because as we mentioned about Ricky Martin was barely in it, that was challenging, giving the real estate to everyone where you got who was in the show. But the finale was and yes, thank you for the budget, Apple. That was fantastic. But the finale was really tough. There was a lot of things coming to a head that had been brewing all season, and it all goes down in one night. We were in one location, primarily the beach ball. So as a director, you don't want it to feel like you're in one room the whole time. So I worked with John Carlos and you guys and Abe, and we came up with ways to make the tent feel like different parts. But then there was just really was choreography with action. I don't want to give it away, but we have mermaids on trapeze. We have...
It's fine, they're in the trailer.
They're in the trailer.
They know they're coming.
And so many stories and such a dance of people moving. It was, in many ways, it was like shooting an action movie with beautiful clothes. And Kristen's work in the finale, it was so important to get her to this place, which it was just amazing to watch. I mean, people were crying at the monitor. It was a comedy. She did such a great job, and I took that very seriously.
Thank you.
Some of it, I would say, has to do with, too, something that which is the background performers, which I saw this thing on Instagram the other day that they were, most of them were with us for 7 months, including the dance team and the choreography team, and they were taking it with the same level that every single other person was too. There was such a level of pride in what they were doing, and you know, obviously mixed with the costumes and all of it, but the choreography, and again, it goes to what I think Abe is doing with music, and you know, it's very dense, and yet those guys were there and proudly there for 7 months.
Yeah, people in the business would come to the Paramount lot because they have never seen it like this in such a long time. We had multiple stages, and you would just be walking through the corridors of the various stages in the alleys, and you've got mermaids walking around, and you've got sailors, and you have astronauts, and it felt like a time capsule. And a lot of people in the business said, I needed to come and just sit here and feel the way it used to be.
Abe, what was the biggest obstacle that you and the writers came up against in sort of arcing this out, and how did you overcome it?
I don't know. I think I didn't feel too many obstacles. I felt creatively supported by Apple. We certainly had the means to execute it to the level that we wanted to. You know, our line producer Jesse Sternbaum's amazing, and so we'd say, you know, if something would change on the fly, we're doing Havana Nights, and I saw we were shooting at the Biltmore Hotel, and then originally it was supposed to be shot outside, and for whatever reason we didn't want to shoot 4 nights of nights. We're like, let's not do that. And so John Carlos said, what if we haven't done anything at the Breakers, which is the big hotel in Palm Beach. He says, we'll go to the Biltmore, let's look at the ballroom. So we go to the ballroom where all the Academy Awards used to be shot, and there are 12 balconies. And I said, okay, I want 12 showgirls, and 1 showgirl in each balcony. And then suddenly it just starts to take shape from the choices that the designers are thinking as hard about it as the writers are. And so that layering process, so this party that was supposed to be a backyard party around a pool suddenly became this joyful event in the Biltmore Hotel with showgirls and 200 dancers. And I said, God, I really am going to miss the pool. And John Carlos says, I'll build you one. So we built a pool.
A fountain, you mean?
And a bridge.
Yeah, no, it was a pool. It was a full pool with a fountain and a bridge. Because I had staged the whole thing in my mind around this pool and this bridge. He said, well, we'll do it here at the Biltmore, and we'll just bring the pool and the bridge to the Biltmore.
This show keeps getting more expensive.
So, you know, you ask about obstacles. I was like, we can do that? And they're like, Jesse's like, I'll make it work. I'll make it work. And he's just a genius at movie. He's like, if you can give me a little bit smaller next episode, I can pay for this.
Ari, before we wrap things up, I just have a couple quick, like, rapid fire questions. Kristen, what required more prep? Learning whale calls or singing like Peggy Lee?
I think whale calls. I actually practiced, Googled and practiced in my house. Yes, probably I think the whale calls. I really wanted to sound like a whale.
But the preparation paid off.
Yeah.
You did it in one take.
Who was the most distracting person on set between takes?
I mean, it wasn't lost on us that Carol Burnett was on set with us, and that, you know, she was just so funny, and everyone just loved her, and she was talked to everybody.
Stories are so beautiful.
Yeah, I I don't know if distracting is the right word, but
Okay.
I mean, I was a little distracted by her.
But she wouldn't step out off set between setups. She would just stay where she was and
Stay there
talk
the
to
whole
crew.
day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
She's amazing.
I mean, she looked like she had a nice seat.
Yeah.
So, what was everyone's favorite scene now that they've watched the whole show and it's?
Oh my gosh, someone else has to go
Baby's been
first.
birthed.
I have to think.
Mine was her confessing to Linda in episode 2 about why she was doing what she was doing for her husband.
I love the scene where you try to seduce Ricky. I think when you lay down on that, take me on this. What's the?
Take me now on this ethnic rug.
Take
Play
me now on
Edelweiss
this-
at me.
And it's the body language. It's just yeah.
I can't pick a scene. I can't. There's too many. I can't pick one.
You don't have to.
I think for me, it's the Peggy Lee sequence.
Ellen, what about you? Did you have one to style or to watch?
I would have to say either the finale, and just in all of its grandeur and everything that goes on in that tent is really incredible.
Jeff, did you have a favorite musical cue?
We really liked approaching the music for this show the same way, like it was approached in the 60s. So it was very thematic and very melodic, and we don't get to do that very often. So I really enjoyed writing theme. It wasn't easy because she's such a multifaceted character. I mean, she doesn't really have one theme. She has a trio. I really enjoyed writing Douglas's theme. For Douglas, we kind of embraced the Mancini sound, and it made sense to me to have the instrument for Douglas be chromatic harmonica.
Well, also the amazing piece of music that's in the end of 6, which is during the hallucination of it. You have that warbling, a piece of music I've never heard. I don't know what.
Oh yes, Buffy
that
St. Marie.
Unbelievable warbling, 60s that so matches this thing that's happening, which was again kind of like, yeah, it was deep, the layering.
Yeah. I went and found that on Spotify right after
Yeah.
I watched
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
I loved it. It's so beautiful. Obviously, I could talk about this show all day, but we can't. Thank you so much for being here. And if you haven't watched Palm Royale, it's on Apple TV Plus, and you should check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.